So Holly, you were one of the guild members who attended the British Columbia Craft Brewers Guild Conference. And one of the seminars that you mentioned that stood out to you was one about breweries and other businesses opening post-COVID and the way that they're trying to think about what that means exactly. And it made you think a little bit about your hometown of Seattle too. So could you maybe just share with us maybe something that you learned or heard from that seminar and maybe how it maybe made you think about Seattle as well?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that they had discussed how they sort of put together like a inter-industry task force where people from the brewing community were working together with the wine industry and the restaurant industry to kind of come up with like this collaborative plan for reopening and to kind of approach government leaders, local government leaders about like getting relief on deferrals of tax payments and kind of things like that. So it made me think of the people I've spoken to here, just in my, reporting with people from the restaurant and beer communities, just kind of how they've all struggled with some of these same issues. And the tax issue in particular was one a lot of people have mentioned, just really needing that relief and not getting much of a response from our local leaders here as far as that goes. So I just thought that was kind of inspiring. It sounds like it was pretty effective up in BC as far as putting together a plan and kind of getting a positive response to what they were asking for.
As someone who thinks about stories and tells stories, it sounds like there are aspects to what you heard about that British Columbia businesses are doing and what it made you think about in terms of Seattle. When it comes to what's going on around COVID preparations and what may take place after COVID, what are some of the pieces there in terms of just interesting stories or things that are happening that kind of catch your ear as something that might be worth thinking about a little deeper?
I think kind of the self-advocacy piece of it is interesting. There's a lot of people who are upset with kind of the way officials have handled things or that reopening. And, in Seattle, we've had a kind of reopening and then closing, and then we've kind of gone back and forth a few times. So there have been a lot of frustrations I've heard from people around that. And I think the idea of like, well, what if we just all come together and we create like our own entity sort of, and we can organize for what we want, that kind of like collective action part of it is interesting to me. Those are always stories that I'm kind of drawn by is, when people can like band together and form their own like, alternative form of resistance or way of, getting their needs met. So that was intriguing to me. And just the fact that the government was more responsive too, like that, again, I don't want to speak super authoritatively, but I just know there's been a lot of frustrations and it sounds like things went more smoothly for them up in BC. So kind of, I'd be interested in what are the differences in, is it the government themselves? Where is that kind of disconnect happening? Like, why did things go differently there versus here? Because BC is only 2 hours away from Seattle. So, it's a world apart, I suppose, in some ways, since it is a different country, but like looking at those differences, I think would be really interesting as well.
So I want to go back to what you had mentioned about your own interest in stories like this is maybe something that could spur some thoughts in other people about your interest to stories where it highlights people banding together for some greater good or cause. When you think about stories like that, or when you come across those kinds of stories, what is it that you find most interesting that kind of really makes it easy to latch onto for you?
Well, anything that's like an alternative is something that intrigues me. an alternative to some kind of established system or process or anything that's like different from the way we've always done things. It's just something that makes me kind of come alive in storytelling. And yeah, just looking at people's ingenuity, I guess, as well, and kind of adaptive nature in the face of, you know, challenging circumstances such as the pandemic, or whether it's someone's personal circumstances in their life, or, you know, a more systemic thing like this.
Why is that exciting to you?
I mean, probably from my own personal background is part of it. I feel like I've kind of come through some difficult things. A lot of people in my family have, kind of immediate family, and like, you know, going way back in history. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just think that that's kind of where, that's a big part of storytelling too, I guess, right? It's like part of the hero's journey is the challenge. And I think that's where all the interesting things happen. If everyone's just kind of moving along, the systems are working as planned, you know, good results are happening along the way, it's not as compelling, I suppose.
Last question on that, because I do find this really interesting. When you find a story like that, of people banding together, doing something that is not done how it's always been done, what is the best way that you found to effectively tell a story like that?
Ooh. That's a good question. I mean, I think probably first looking at what is the way things have always been done, and where is that maybe falling short, or how is that not serving people? So kind of what created the need in the first place. And, you know, talking to the individual people themselves and getting their personal stories and their motivations. Usually their own personal stories, you know, are also kind of behind their drive to do something different, or to, whether it's to like challenge authority or to just stand up for what they need. So kind of how that plays into the larger picture.